It needs to be short, sweet, convey credibility, connect with them, and get a conversation started. That's it. That's the goal of the outreach strategy.
Hi, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Tom Shipley. I'm CEO of Ava Agencies Aggregator. I'm a serial entrepreneur, 18 acquisitions and exit, raised over $100 million, and co-host of DealCon Agency and Brand CEO Summit in September. And I am so excited that we get to continue our discussions with my friend Matt Bodnar, and also co-host of the summit, and talking about programmatic M&A.
Well, Tom, I'm super excited to jump in. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Matt Bodnar, and I am a private equity investor. I've done more than $100 million worth of transactions, and I am co-hosting the DealCon M&A CEO Summit with Tom. So I'm really pumped to jump in.
So what we're going to talk about today is there are so many reasons why the whole concept is so foreign about, okay, how do you actually, I get the concept you guys talked about why the highest and best use of founders or CEO or an entrepreneur's time is actually acquisitions and the power of it. And if I spend if I spend a fraction of the time I spend on trying to grow my business on M&A, how much faster an increase in enterprise value? Okay, I get that. I get that agencies and e-com brands are great places to do acquisitions. But what holds most people I talk to back is the concept of where to get leads from. And so for us, that's the most exciting thing. And we're going to start off talking about some low-tech, low-effort methods of getting leads that you didn't even think about. And then we're going to talk about how you can turn it more into a system and programmatic way of generating leads for acquisitions. Because someone once told me that those once-in-a-lifetime deals that fell across your lap, if you're doing M&A properly, they should be happening on a monthly basis.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. It's funny. Once you get the bug, and I think it's happened to both of us at different times in our careers, then you realize, like, dang, this M&A thing is actually pretty interesting. You start to realize the next logical step is, well, how do I find these deals? How do I find companies to buy? How do I find opportunities? And so that's what we're going to jump into and look at a couple different strategies.
The way that a lot of people turn to is a lot of people will start researching and talking with people in their network about who are the investment bankers or the brokers that are out there, or going to websites. The challenge is that those are already in processes that are competitive, and you're already competing with a short time frame on those. I love to find off-market deals. Those are deals that aren't being actively sold, because that's where you're going to find your greatest opportunity. So I'm going to start very, very simple. So at the beginning of COVID, when I started, so when COVID happened, our offices were in Jersey City. I lived in Northern Bergen County, which meant it was an hour and a half from my door to my desk each way. So suddenly when COVID hit, I no longer had that commute. And I was not going to watch Tiger King. So I started with the idea of let me go acquire a business. And I really wanted to acquire an agency. So the first thing I did is I looked at my LinkedIn profile that it was up to date. Next thing I did, I threw the word investor into the title of what I do. And then the next thing I did is very simply, I went onto my Facebook and I did the same thing on Instagram, and I did it on LinkedIn. And then I very simply put a message out there that said I'm looking to invest in or acquire digital agency or e-com brands. If you want to talk, DM me. Very simple. And within 12 hours, I had 15 leads. Just sort of simple. And most people said, well, you stop there, you don't do that again. No, if I chose to, again, it took me a while to work through those leads. And then a week later, I did again and got another 10 leads. So again, it is a very low-tech way, but it's something that you can do. And the key thing with acquisition is the whole concept can be intimidating. But what Matt and I do is create momentum. Just do something, because you're going to learn along the way, and you can't screw up too badly here.
Tom, your story is a great story for like just a dead simple way to start, right? And I mean, we can talk, and at DealCon, we're going to go crazy deep into some strategies and like ad nauseum. I mean, I have 23 plus deal flow strategies. Literally, I made a list of them. But your example is a great starting place, which is just start with your network. I was actually looking at a really interesting study of people in the capital markets, which is just a fancy way of saying people who are buying and selling businesses and raising money and that kind of stuff. And looking at how business brokers found their deals, right? Because business brokers have some of the best access to opportunities, and they see a lot of deals. Now we want to try and get them before the brokers do, right? In a best case scenario. But how did they find it? And what I found was what they said is referrals was the best source. Okay, great. Well, how can we engineer referrals? We'll talk about that in a second. But the second best source was networking, right? And so they basically said after referrals, how do you generate the most opportunities? And like 66% of them said networking was the next best thing. And the way to generate referrals and networking are very similar. I mean, there's certain different strategies, but I've gone pretty deep into the network science behind this, literally looking at studies, research, data around how people find opportunities in their lives. And these can be opportunities for investments, businesses to buy, even job opportunities, all kinds of stuff. And what you discover when you look at this, and you've probably heard this term, but maybe not really thought about what it means, because I'd heard it a dozen times and I was like, yeah, cool. It's just the strength of weak ties. I heard that. I was like, yeah, weak ties. Yeah, sounds interesting. Okay, great. I don't know what that means, right? So what it means is actually pretty interesting, which is a lot of us think that the closest people to us are the most valuable people in our network, right? Well, the problem is, yeah, they really want to help, but their network and your network are like a 95% overlap. But the people who are on the fringes, the very peripheries of your network, the people who you haven't talked to in a couple of years, you don't know that well, those people have a network that has almost no overlap or no overlap at all with your network. And those are your weak ties. But you see, those people have a whole network of strong ties that are other different people that are not currently in your network nodes. And so if you flip the script a little bit and start to think about, hey, great, you should absolutely talk to the people who are close to you, but really the most valuable people in terms of finding leads and sourcing opportunities from a networking standpoint, from a referral standpoint, are often the people who are on the very fringes of your network, the very periphery of your network. And your story is a great illustration of, there's certainly tons of other strategies you can do to really proactively source opportunities from your existing contacts and relationships. But that's a great, super simple way. It's like, hey, in 2 minutes, you can make a post on social media. You had 15 or 20 deals. Anybody can do that today, right? And the great thing about, as much as you may or may not want to do it, the great thing about posting on a place like Facebook or Instagram to find deals is like, yeah, your friends are going to see it and they might be like, what are you talking about? Right. But like that person you don't know that well is going to see it. And they're actually the more important person in terms of finding those deal flow opportunities. So to me, network is a really powerful strategy.
And if you do that on a regular basis, I don't care if it's once a month, even people in your network are going to think about, oh, if I hear business for sale, I'm going to tell Tom, or you should talk to Tom, because it's going to anchor and remind them on a regular basis, whether you post weekly or monthly on that. The other thing that I learned is that when you get into if your network has entrepreneurs, whether you go to conferences, lunch, any networking event, or friends, when they own businesses, you can always ask, what's your goal for the future? How much longer do you want to do what you're doing? And then what do you want after this business? What do you want to do? Find out their real aspirations. But that also you might be surprised of what they want to do versus what they're doing right now. And it creates opportunities for, it's similar to what I shared before, is we didn't think this young couple who had grown this business so fast over 5 years, and most of the growth over the prior 2, they would have any interest in selling. And until we asked the question, would you ever consider selling? Boom, yes. And suddenly we're having deal discussions. It happens that easy. And once you just have this as part of and first of all, I find it fascinating to talk to entrepreneurs about what their long-term objectives, what they want to be doing, because I love the human component. There's something about the DNA of an entrepreneur and really understanding what they're doing and how they view their current business. And so it's a great conversation to get to know people, but it creates those opportunities.
Yeah, you're totally right. And it's funny. We can talk about a lot of other deal flow strategies, and we will get into many of them. But especially in the agency world or the e-com world, if you really just think about existing capabilities you already have, finding deals is the same thing as finding customers. You're just looking for something different, right? And so you can apply a lot of the same strategies that you would use to find or acquire customers to find or acquire acquisition opportunities. But we at the last DealCon event, we had this crazy story, which you're talking about asking people what they want to do, where 2 people in the room ended up wanting to do a deal with each other and negotiated it live on stage, right? So asking those questions, having those conversations, being in the room with the people, leveraging your network, those are some of the building blocks of a really powerful and sustainable deal flow strategy.
We talked about brokers for a second, so I'm going to share one of my favorite broker strategy is I like to track deals that I see come on the market, and I might get a sim or basically some information on it, but then I do nothing for 6 months. And because what percent of deals never close?
Depends on the stats, but like 90%'s one that's tossed out there quite a bit. Like I've seen a little higher, I've seen lower.
Yes. So 90% of deals that are put out to market never close, even those that get incredible deal term sheets. There's 1,001 reasons. And what's interesting is if you're in a process and you have a deal and you're going through due diligence and the buyer backs out, they couldn't get the funding, they have problems in their existing businesses, nothing to do with you, or they just decided to take a different direction. Now, suddenly you had a broken deal. Now, other people view that you had a broken deal. Now, suddenly you're damaged goods, and they basically drop your value, what they're willing to pay for you. And therefore, what I love to do is touch base with people 3-6 months after the fact is, hey, how'd the transaction go? Did you sell? Did you get what you want to? How's life after the deal? And remember that stat, 90%, most of the people you touch base with 6 months later did not do a deal. And what's really amazing at that period of time is now suddenly the massive valuation they were looking for, the unrealistic deal terms that they had, they're more realistic now. They've been to the market, they've been educated, and therefore they're willing to be extremely flexible on the deal terms. So I love that strategy of just tracking and touching base with people that put their business on the marketplace.
Super smart. Yeah, I almost always avoid new listings, right? Because they're going to be hotter, more competitive. The seller's expectations are in a lot of cases going to be too lofty. But another way to replicate that same strategy, and one that I like to use, is if you're talking to a broker and you call them on a particular deal, right? In this case, hey, maybe it's a new deal. You take a look at it and decide it's not really a fit. I always like to ask them, hey, what do you have that's kind of gathering dust? Like, what listings do you have that have been around for a while, or do you have any processes that just fell apart or whatever? Because those can often be, as you said, great opportunities to jump in and find deals. And so I always tell people, because you kind of go through this. I have this like meme that I share with some of my friends in the M&A world. That's like, you go through this phase of like only using brokers and marketplaces, right? So it's like somebody wants to buy a business. Their first place they usually go is they go on Biz Buy Sell or whatever and start drumming up a bunch of activity. And then they go to the polar opposite end of the spectrum of like, hey, I hate brokers. I'm only trying to find off-market deals, right? And they think that that's kind of the source of truth. And then you sort of reach this like Zen realization once you become a master that like, you want to source off market, but also now that you know how to interact with brokers and what to look for, you can actually find great deals looking at and working with broker deals. You just have to know which ones to avoid, both deals and the brokers, because sometimes the broker can also be, part of, or a source of the problem in some cases.
So what I want to inch our way, Matt, into really some elegant solutions that are ways to really do programmatic M&A and lead gen. But let's start inching our way as far as options people could take as they say, okay, I posted on social, I talk to brokers, and I want to talk to a bunch of brokers. And if I ask them about old deals, then that's great. I'm talking and actively in conversation with people. The next thing that you can do is email your list. Obviously, you have your contacts. You can go and however you want to slice and dice or engender your contacts, you can just put that same message out there you put in social, because most people never saw. Oh my God, everyone saw my post. I put it one time. No one saw your post. A few people saw your post, okay? That's why you replicate it, and maybe someone's going to see it the third time, okay? But even that, most people never get it. So therefore, you send that email out and say, hey, John, or hey, Susan, I am in the market looking to invest in or acquire XYZ. If you know of someone who is interested in selling, please let them know. Again, it's another way of doing it. It's a low touch. So the next way that I like to do it is, and we can talk about LinkedIn. So Matt, what is your favorite way of using LinkedIn to find leads?
So before we jump into LinkedIn, because there's a bunch of tactical ways you can apply LinkedIn, you hit on something really important, which is like, there's this belief that there's sort of a couple limiting beliefs here around sourcing deals that I see people struggle with all the time. So one of them is this idea of like, hey, I posted once, everybody saw it. I don't need to post it. It's like the deeper you go into learning about social media strategy and using social media to generate opportunities and stuff, is like you will get bored of saying the same thing over and over and over and over again before 90% of your audience or your contacts have ever heard it. And so you almost have to be nauseatingly repetitive before, and people will be like, wow, this is crazy. And it's like, dude, I've posted this 30 times. You know what I mean? And you're just now catching on. But that's really what happens. And another sort of belief I see all the time is this idea that like, hey, I never respond to insert X. Cold email, direct mail, LinkedIn messages, whatever it is, I never respond to XYZ, right? And I see that, I hear it all the time. The reality is, just because you don't doesn't mean that people don't, right? I mean, I'll give you some specific thoughts around LinkedIn in a second, but like, I mean, I've used cold email to find and close deals. I've used direct mail, like old school style. In 2022, I bought a $3.5 million business that we sourced using direct mail, to give you a sense, right? So I mean, it's alive and well, and still a great strategy. And you can use LinkedIn. There's tons of different ways to do this, and so. LinkedIn in particular, to me, Sales Navigator honestly is great. I mean, the ROI on something like that, to be able to really drill in, use a tool like Sales Navigator, and then depending on exactly how you want to play it, there's a couple different applications that you can either port into. You can do it manually. You can have a VA kind of handle a lot of your outreach. You can use a tool like Apollo, which can integrate with LinkedIn and sort of connect a lot of different puzzle pieces. But to me, it's almost just pick a strategy and really go a little bit deeper into it. You can try LinkedIn, you can try cold email, you can do all of these different things. As you hit on, Tom, like one of my favorite sources of deals are what I call backyard deals, right? Which is basically just finding deals that are in your own backyard. And what you'll discover is, especially if you're in the agency world, for example, right? Like a lot of times you'll white label another agency, or you'll refer XYZ work to them that you don't do, and like your existing network of people you already know in the space, your own backyard, your other vendors and suppliers, and maybe other customers of yours, whatever, can all be fantastic sources of acquisition opportunities and fantastic sources of deal flow. And to me, another great pool of deal flow is industry conferences, right? Like going to places where whether other business owners hang out in your industry and building relationships with them. Because even if it's not today, it might be in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, that business owner might want to transact, and maybe they see your post on LinkedIn, or they remember you had a conversation about M&A or whatever, and suddenly you have an off-market opportunity that you wouldn't have otherwise had.
Now I'll share this with you, is whenever you're doing email campaigns or LinkedIn campaigns, your goal is not to express the opportunity and share about yourself. Your goal in those messages, very, very short. All your goal is to get a response and continue the discussion. So as I share with you, those same pithy, and again, you can give some context for yourself. I use different messages. I'm an e-commerce and agency serial entrepreneur with brands selling over $1 billion. I'm impressed by, name the agency. I'm exploring strategic acquisitions and believe the potential collaboration. Let's connect to discuss further. Best Tom. Again, it can be very simple like that in your LinkedIn outreach. And by the way, Sales Navigator is great. If you want to, do it manually. Again, there's so many ways you can just get started. And sometimes people need to have a little bit of momentum, a little bit of success for them to make the next plunge and actually set up Sales Navigator.
You're totally right. And I think your messaging there is spot on, right? You don't want to send an essay. I was advising somebody recently about an outbound campaign he was working on to find businesses to buy. And he was sending them like this, multi-paragraph, multi-page thing where all the paragraphs were like 2 inches long. And he was like explaining the math of the transactions and all this other stuff. And I was like, pump the brakes. Like you cannot be sending this to people. It needs to be short, sweet, convey credibility, connect with them, and get a conversation started. That's it. That's the goal of the outreach strategy. But I mean, we could unpack these strategies all day, right? I mean, there's tons of different ways to do this. The reality is, it's a very complex topic with lots of opportunities, lots of avenues to pull on, and we're going to be going way deeper into a bunch of this stuff at DealCon, right? So we're going to have 3 days to unpack sourcing strategies and funding strategies and acquisition strategies and all of these different puzzle pieces when we get together in September. And I think it's if you want to buy businesses, it's a great opportunity to connect, to come to meet 100 other CEOs and business owners, which maybe there's some opportunity to do some deals with, and see from the experts in the industry, us, but also lots of other people who are crushing it in the M&A world, how they're playing the game and how you can play it too.
So, and what I love about this event is you get the ultimate CEOs and founders that are on fire. And the agencies are from $1 million in net revenue to $50 million. Brands will be between $5 million and $100 million. But it's those that really want to push the next level. So I love entrepreneurs and founders that are on fire, that are looking for that next growth opportunity. And it's interesting. There's two people that came to the event that had tangential businesses that suddenly exploded on them exploded in a very positive way. Like suddenly the new businesses were doing over suddenly $1 to $2 million MRR on those businesses. So suddenly they have their agencies, and one agency was a $5 million agency and the other was a $1 million agency. Now suddenly those agencies became distractions for them. So what they did is they started talking with people who are at the event about, you want to buy my business, and I don't care, just take it over and we'll do a rev share on it. Or give me a piece of equity in the overall parent entity, because they were focused on the next big opportunity for them. So you never know. And a number of the people that were in the room sold to other people in the room. But this is the room, and the speakers are phenomenal. And it's, by the way, I curated it, which is some of my favorite thought leaders. I basically called friends and said, hey, you want to just hang out for 3 days with some incredible thought leaders? And so that's what we're having in this room. So I hope you join us. If you want more information on the event, dealconlive.com. It's short for Deal Conference, dealconlive.com. You'll find more information, or DM us. And unfortunately, we have to cap it off at 100. So
hopefully we'll see you in Nashville in September. If you want to go deeper on buying businesses, it's the place to be.